shell that's about this long. And those who fired them, I've read a number of things about this, and even talked to some guys who said when they fired that 75 millimeter at ground targets, the plane stopped. Now, I don't think it really did, but it sure seemed that way to them. So after the B-25s, these were fighter pilots. Did I mention that? Okay. Oh, we could get like 30 P-51s. Yeah. Okay. And Cochran himself flew missions as a P-51 fighter pilot. But then they thought, it's really kind of silly to make these guys walk in that couple of 100 miles behind enemy lines. So what we really need now, next slide, let's get some tugs. Let's get some C-47s. And, oh, wait a minute, they need to pull something. So the next slide shows the CG-4A glider. Okay. You may search the world, but you won't find an uglier aircraft than the CG-4A if you just concentrate on looks. It looked like a boxcar in which they welded a couple of really thick, fat wings. It was ugly, except if you begin to think about what it can do, it's not quite as ugly. They could get a Jeep in there. They could get mules in there. They could get 15 to 20 soldiers fully dressed in combat. Okay, and so let's do this thing. We got the 100 Waco gliders. We have the helicopter. The first one's in operational use, and there's quite a deal going on with this. It's like you don't get our helicopters because we're still testing them. And Cochran said, we're going to test them in combat. Give us the helicopters. They ended up with them, and that's a long story, but they got them. They also ended up with L-1 Stinsons to use as flying ambulances, and a dozen of the Nordine Norseman UC-64 light cargo aircraft. Okay, and then we have, here's a picture of the tug section. That's Dick Cole is in the upper left-hand corner of this, yeah. And Buddy Lewis, the first baseman, third baseman for the Senators, is in the center of that first row. So lots of training goes on when they get to India, including something that gave you all your motto. Okay, on February the 15th, just 2.5 weeks before this is set to launch, they're on a night training mission. They've got Chindits aboard gliders. They're towing them on double tow, one ahead, one below. Something happened. 2 gliders came together and they went down, and some Chindits were killed, as were some Air Commando pilots. Okay. And Cochran and Allison thought, this is really going to damage the relationship. But the leader of the British Chindits wrote them that note that said, please know that we'll follow your boys anywhere, anytime, any place. Okay. So that's where that comes from. As you know, there were a lot of training accidents. This one kind of shocked me just a little bit. Anybody ever heard of how many young men and a few women died in aviation training accidents in World War II? Just aviation training accidents? Any ideas? Okay, we're not going to spend any time on it. 15,000. That's a 1 and a 5 and 3 zeros. 15,000, mostly young men, died in training accidents. Well, what do you suppose would happen today if that many people died in training accidents in any branch of the service? Okay. It was a war. It was the price you paid. That was their view of the time. Operation Thursday was launched from bases in India on March the 5th. They had to climb to 8,000 feet in order to clear the Chin Hills, which would have been called mountains anywhere else in the globe, except for the foothills of the Himalayas. Okay. And they were going to take them on double tow. Okay, that's 2 gliders behind 1 C-47. It worked well in practice. It didn't work so well that night. The Chindits, having been there, but for some of them having been there before and done that, they were told to bring X amount. They were severely limited on what they could carry aboard that day, but they took a little more than they were supposed to. As it turned out, they found out later those gliders were overloaded by up to 2,000 pounds. Okay, so when they began to take off, they were digging into the earth like that. They had to have runners holding the tails down. They finally got into the air, but they're jerking and like this, and sort of sawing back and forth. And the tow ropes began to break and release those gliders way too early. Dick was flying that night, number 3, and lost both of his gliders just after they passed over the Chin Hills, and they spiraled down into the blackness of the Burma jungle. As it turned out, almost everyone aboard those two gliders did survive and make it back. But he turned around and came back and said, yeah, we've got a problem. And so they resorted to single tows to go into the clearings in the jungle called Broadway. There were supposed to be 2 of them. The other was Piccadilly. And Piccadilly, as it turned out, through an overflight and photo recon said, oh, something's happened really bad here. We've got teak logs all over this thing. If we try to go in there in the moonlight at dark, we're gonna kill everybody that goes in. So they quickly diverted to Broadway, a small clearing in the Burmese jungle, about 150 miles behind the Japanese lines. They released, and most of the gliders made it in. But what they didn't know at Broadway was what looked like a really nice, almost a putty green kind of a place, was 6 feet of elephant grass that hid things like tree stumps and gouges and stumps everywhere. They wrecked, of the 37 gliders that went in, all but 3 were wrecked beyond any possible use after that. So one of the things that they had planned early on was to recover these gliders by snatching them out. And I think we've got a picture of that later on. They didn't have anything to snatch out, so that one didn't happen. After they landed, most of these things were damaged. A second lieutenant named Robert Brackett, however, salvaged the little bulldozer that they had put into one of these CG-4A gliders, and he came putting that thing out of the jungle. And Allison, who was thinking this thing is a mess up of the first water, he looked at the wreckage around him and the awful conditions of the Broadway clearing, and said, oh man, he said, is there any possible way you think we can make a landing strip? Because this whole thing was supposed to be, a kind of pathfinder operation. They were going to build an airstrip to bring in C-47s after that, so they could really start the hauling. Brackett looked around and said, well, I think so. And Allison said, well, do you have any idea how long it's going to take? And Brackett said, would this afternoon be okay? He could have hugged him. He could have hugged him. As it turned out, he was as good as his word, and most of you probably know that Lieutenant Brackett was killed in Burma 2 months later. Okay. One of the real heroes of Operation Thursday. So, at that first night at Broadway, we probably need to flip these slides a little bit here. Let's see, we get the Chindits loading up, and yeah, we're taking in mules. At the end of the first night, the Air Commandos had taken in 539 men, 3 mules, and 30,000 pounds worth of stores and equipment. Okay, there's the double tow. It didn't last long. And in less than a week, they had delivered 7,000 Allied troops to Broadway and another 2,000 to another clearing called Chowringhee. 500,000 pounds of supplies, 509,000. 1,357 mules and horses. Okay. It was really quite a remarkable record. Okay. We're running out of time, but I'm going to bore you here by reading you real quickly what may be all this. By the way, this is Dick Cole's own, that's his airplane towing that glider. That's his tail number. Okay, it's over the Chin Hills. Okay. Perhaps the most important contribution of Project 9 was the coordinated use of air power and ground action in unconventional ways to effect limited goals as part of a larger strategy. The first Air Commando group could be called the father of modern Special Forces warfare, the progenitor of Special Operations Command that used a variety of weapons and tactics in most unconventional ways. Okay. So the days of horsehide flying jackets, those Natal boots, and those crusher hats, those are gone forever. There's a new breed of irregular warfighter, that's you guys, flyers, soldiers, mariners. You know, I've replaced this sort of devil-may-care charm of these early Air Commandos. The new breed's no less dedicated or fearless, but you're far more anonymous, more highly trained in unconventional and asymmetrical warfare. Sophisticated weapons and eyes in the skies intelligence have removed a lot of the need for boots in the cockpit or on the ground. Weaponized drones now go anywhere without necessarily putting a pilot in harm's way, but I know you guys still do it. No doubt this will prove both more lethal to our enemies and more protective of the warriors that we're sending in our name to these far-off places. But for sure, daring, audacity, perseverance in the face of adversity. It's just hard to beat this true story of the 1st Air Commando Group and the invasion of Burma by glider at night. So thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you, Dr. Overstrom, for your enlightening presentation and sharing your historic perspective on the Operation Thursday mission. At this time, we will take a 5-minute intermission to allow remaining plates to be removed, coffee refills, and comfort breaks. When we return, Dr. Overstrom will be joined by the veterans of Operation Thursday for a question and answer session. Ladies and gentlemen, please begin to find your seats. The question and answer session will begin shortly. Now it is time to begin the question and answer session with our panel members. We are honored to have 3 veterans of Operation Thursday here with us today. Lieutenant Colonel Richard Cole, just 6 months from celebrating his 104th birthday, is best known as the last surviving member of the famed Doolittle Raiders, serving as Lieutenant Colonel Jimmy Doolittle's co-pilot on B-25 Crew Number 1. After the raid, he flew the Hump, the Himalayan mountains, for a year supplying U.S. and Allied troops in China. He then volunteered for the 1st Air Commando Group, returning to the China, Burma, India Theater of Operations, where he flew in Operation Thursday. He towed gliders and flew troops and supplies into Burma behind enemy lines for several months. Lieutenant Colonel Cole retired from the Air Force in 1966 as a command pilot with more than 5,000 flight hours and 250 combat missions. Senior Master Sgt. William Cartwright entered the Army Air Forces in March 1942 and was accepted into the Aviation Cadet Program and Light Aircraft Pilot Training. He was designated a liaison pilot and awarded L pilot wings as a private. He was then sent to Fort Sill, Oklahoma to train as an artillery spotter pilot. In April 1945, he was promoted to Staff Sergeant and sent to India, assigned to the 1st Air Commando Group, where he piloted the L-5 liaison aircraft. He stayed in the Air Force for 24 years, including 14 years in atomic weapons, and retired in 1966. Following his retirement, Senior Master Sgt. Cartwright started a crop dusting company and flew as an agricultural pilot until his 2nd retirement. Staff Sergeant Patt Meara joined the Army Air Forces in February 1942, shortly after the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. Soon after basic training, he was sent to Augusta, Georgia, where he was trained on a 50 caliber machine gun. He was assigned to the 54th Air Service Group and sent to North Africa in mid-1943. He then went to India as a gunner on a 6-ton truck. He volunteered for the 1st Air Commando Group in January 1944 and was an aerial gunner on the B-25H medium bomber flying close air support missions over Burma. For 2 days straight during Operation Thursday, beginning on March 5, 1944, Staff Sergeant Meara refueled C-47s to sustain the fight. He served with that elite unit until October 1944 and separated from the service in 1946. Staff Sergeant Meara lived in the U.S. Virgin Islands, making a living as a diver and a licensed boat captain. That job resulted in his longtime moniker, Captain Pat. Dr. Okerstrom will begin the question and answer session with our veterans. If you would like to ask a question after the initial discussion, please stand and a microphone will be brought to you. Gentlemen, the floor is yours.
Okay, thanks very much. I'm going to let them sit, but I don't sit very well, so I'm going to stand and wander around and flail my arms. And as you ask these questions, I may have to maybe restate the question to our veterans today. I may have to put it in slightly different terms, or I may have to yell at them really loud, really close. But in any event, their hearing isn't quite as good as it was 75 years ago, but they can hear. All right. So, real quickly, you've already heard a story about some of the Air Commandos and Operation Thursday, I think now is the opportunity for you to hear directly, not from some academic, the guys say, but from the guys who were there and did that. So do we have some questions? Do we have an initial question that you want to just start out? And to whom are you directing the question? If it's a general question, you know, we'll just try to rotate the answers. If it's to a specific one of our veterans, then I'll try to get that to them. It looks like we may have a question over here.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Senior Master Sgt. Ben Bosco from the 4th Special Operations Squadron. And I have a question from the gunship, AC-130 gunship community, and the question is for Lieutenant Colonel Cole. And sir, the question is, you flew on maybe the most daring mission of World War II, the Doolittle Raid. aerial invasion that took place at night.
How would you compare the raid on the Doolittle raid? How would you compare that to Operation Thursday and the aerial invasion?
Well, I kind of analyzed the two arrangements, and as far as I know, there were no Rambo-type people in either group. You take on the situation and you're scared all the time. But that's not all bad. It gives you a heads-up opportunity to think actively and more positively. And it also is kind of a calming situation that you get yourself into. As far as the raid itself, once you left the ship, you didn't have any wiggle room to say. If the worst thing would have happened, there would have been 16 B-25s floating around in the Tokyo Bay, because we had no wiggle room. And it was that way all the way to China. In the Thursday situation, you did have opportunity of recourse, maybe saving your buns and that aspect. So I've got to say that personally that the raid was the most harmful thinking way. And I say this because in our zeal to save space for fuel, we had limited ourselves without really realizing it, that the only communication that we had on the B-25 was the 45-mile range of the command center. And had there been a big foul up, we would be at the danger point of being in the water with no means of contact anybody by the range of that set. So, that's why I personally figured that the raid was worse for me. Then on the Thursday side, we had the objective of Air Hurlburt throwing the gliders over the out 8,000-foot mountains, and as a result, we did have casualties as far as the ropes breaking, and in my case, our rope broke. And we had to return to base. Before that, we fell back and landed. They loaded us again, and we went on into Broadway. And by that time, Broadway looked like the TV pictures of the hurricane, or the tornado. But we succeeded in delivering a lot of the stuff we wanted to from then on till the end of the week.
Thanks, Dick. I know we've got some more questions. Here's one.
Kind of scared. There it goes. All right. Good morning, gentlemen. I'm Senior Master Sgt. from 11 SOAS. My question's real quick, it's general for the panel there. What was it like to be one of the first, like part of the first Air Commando group? And did you ever imagine that that would grow from that small dedicated force into what AFSOC is today?
Oh, you want to take that one? Did you understand it?
No.
When you went into Broadway, or when Operation Thursday started, did you have any idea that you were part of an organization that was going to grow into what we now have as Special Operations Command of the Air Force? What was that like?
Simple answer, no. You have to, pardon me, I have an impairment in my speech, but we were just a bunch of characters doing a job and no thought of the future. We woke up in the morning and did whatever was necessary to do, went to bed at night and woke up the next morning. And no idea that we were the precursors of history that's and it was just a bunch of characters doing what we're doing. I would have to say, for the most part, characters was the summation of our group. We never knew what we were getting into. How could you plan when, in my case, I volunteered. 3 days later, I was in an L5 with a barracks bag and a rifle, a carbine, and landed at Lollygott in the upper Sun Valley, stepped out of the plane. Character who later turned out to be my hero from Terry and the Pirates, slapped me on the shoulder and said, "Welcome, sport." I was a commando.
We talked at one time, actually just last night, about whether he could tell any stories about Jackie Coogan, and we decided there was no way to clean them up. You'll have to read the book. Next question, please.
All right, sir, Lieutenant Cornish from the 34th Special Operations Squadron. This is for Lieutenant Colonel Cole. Sir, because only around 3 of the 30-plus gliders that landed on Broadway ended up fully operational and intact, what did you and the other Air Commandos do with the torn-up aircraft?
What happened, what did y'all do with the jet gliders at Broadway?
Tell me again.
What did the commandos do with all of those wrecked gliders at Broadway?
Well, I don't know exactly what happened to them, but there were quite a few. As a matter of fact, Colonel Allison had set up a point in a test run to where there was a light that the glider pilots were supposed to follow. When they hit that light, they were supposed to pull a separation to handle and to go ahead and land. But what happened in the meantime, nobody realized that the people who we were hauling had gone overweight as far as stuff to carry in. And when they pulled the board at that light, it was the wrong place to do it because it was premature and the landing pattern was destroyed there. And it ended up, there were quite a few of them went between breeds and so forth. One energetic young man that was the co-pilot chopped down a plank and stuck it between I think it was a road scraper that they were going to use, and the back of his seat. Well, when they hit the ground, the road shifted, and he had placed it in between his seat and it pushed the nose up, and it saved the crew. There were things like that were happening, and there were quite a few gliders destroyed. People were injured, but the show had to go on, and it ended up like it did.
So as to sum that up, the plan looks really great on paper, but when it was effective, there was a lot of chaos. But these trained Air Commandos made the best of that, and we know it turned out well. Another question, please.
Good morning. This is Senior Airman Andrew Dove. I'm from the 4th. My question is for Senior Master Sgt. Cartwright. Sir, compared to today's aircraft technology, how was it flying the L5?
Oh, okay. Oh, sir, to begin with, I've flown several other L planes in the States. There were 65 horsepower, 3 to 1 range, something like that. And the L5 was quite up that scale from that. It had 185 horsepower, 65. And it had a self-starter. That was very important. It didn't prompt it again. It had flaps. So it had a lot of power and had a lot of lifting capacity with that. And it was a very tough airplane. You could land that thing approximately any place you could drive a Jeep. So you could go in the jungle and land and be sure it was going to survive. It was made to carry just 2 passengers. But on one occasion later, it wasn't in the 1st Air Commando, one occasion later, flying the Philippines, and it took 4 guys and a dog got in one L5 and just went off just to go swimming someplace. That's how much that airplane would carry if you stuffed it in there. In one case, again, this was not the 1st Air Commando, but what the airplane would do. I was flying the mail in the Philippines, and I was on the way into Manila, and they stopped me on the way in, and this was December 1945. They had mail for a parade on the northern tip of the Philippines. These guys had been sitting up there from an anti-aircraft battery since the war had been over in August, waiting to go home. 10 million American men were around the world waiting to go home. I would go in there with a movie for somebody else, and they would try to beg me out of it. Well, these other guys wanted just as much as they did, so I couldn't do that. Anyway, the mail was for these guys that I knew that were really hungry for anything. So we stuffed that little L-pod right up to the roof with mail bags. And I headed up the peninsula up there toward Perry. I got up to safe flying altitude, about 4,000 feet. There's not another airplane, not another person in sight where I was going. I was by myself in that little airplane. I got the detachment mail out and read about my beloved grandfather in Columbus, Georgia, near Columbus, that just passed away. 24-year-old kid, the other side of the world from Georgia. First time I cried as a Annabelle. That was a sad part of the trip. I kept on going about an hour and a half later. I went into a Perry and went in over the tents about 200 feet or less on a steep bank, so hopefully they could see the mail bags in the back. Whether they did or not, that wasn't normal to buzz the tents when I went in. So when I landed and taxied in, almost everybody on the base was out at the strip, just to watch those mail bags come off the airplane. They knew they had to wait for them to be sorted out before they could mail them. Nobody said a thing to me that I recall, but it didn't matter. The pleasure that I had was seeing the smiles on those faces, and boy, in a few minutes they're going to read a letter from mom, a letter from my dad, or their wife, or something like that. So I was, I say, the saddest and the most pleasure of one trip. And that was a typical airplane would fly anything you could stuff in it that would get off the ground and go. So it was a good one for that purpose over there. These other people did better with that in the jungles in India than I did in Burma. But that's just one example of what it was that I had. And I got into crop dusting later, so I was training for a crop duster and didn't know it.
Do we have another question? Any? Jason?
Good morning, I'm Amber Walls from the 11th SOAS, and my question is for Sergeant Murray. So prior to the run-up of Operation Thursday, and with the B-25s and the P-51s trained for venturing out and attacking targets of opportunity, did you have any run-ins with Japanese aircraft?
When you were flying as a gunner, 25, did you ever run into Japanese aircraft?
I did. I experienced anti-aircraft fire, which scared the hell out of me. But outside of that, we were involved in bombing runs and strafing runs, and we caught a convoy, Japanese, taking a break along the road, kind of a heyday. But actually, I never fired at another plane. Never encountered them. The anti-aircraft personnel, Japanese, were lousy shots.
Here's a question.
Just wondering. Actually, I've got two questions. One for Sergeant Cartwright. You were enlisted and you were a pilot. How many enlisted pilots did they have in those days? And the second question, being a former paratrooper myself, I was going to ask Colonel Cole if he made more than that one jump.
First, I don't have any idea how many airplanes we had. What was the other part of it?
First of all, do
again, I can't give you numbers there. There were a lot of them, all I saw was enlisted pilots, and, I was, stationed with several hundred of them at the time, was what all I can tell you. I'm sure there were thousands, but, I just couldn't give you a number. They were, about half of them were washed up cadets, which I was. I wanted to fly a P-47. And sitting on the ramp one day waiting to fly, I told my buddy that some guy came in a Cub. First time I seen an L2 Cub, an L4 Cub. I said, if they just give me one of those and private pay, I would be happy. 3 months later, it's exactly what I had. But I enjoyed the L-planes. You could, L5 exactly, particularly you could drive that thing like it was a Jeep. And the training in Texas, one place was the leader took it to take an airplane and we'd follow him wherever he went. He would land in a field, I mean a rough field. We'd taxi around the prop shop in grass, things like that. We didn't know where we were going, we were following him. And just taxi around and take off again. So it was a very tough airplane, a lot of fun to fly, and you couldn't do very much to hurt it. So it was very, very useful for a purpose. And again, I was trained to be a crop duster and didn't know it.
And you had another question from Colby?
Yeah, did you ever make any more parachute jumps? I understand you bailed out, so I know we got one.
No.
Jumped out of an airplane after the Doolittle raid. Did you ever jump out of a plane again? I think that's the answer.
Well, I was flying the mail in the Philippines after India, and we had a parachute, but the passenger didn't. So if I had a passenger in the back seat, I did not put the straps on the parachute. I was going down no matter what. So fortunately, I didn't have to do that.
Well, I think we've probably, I know that there's a lot more questions out there. Maybe you can grab these guys at some point. On behalf of our veterans on the stage today, as well as myself, thank you very much for this opportunity to talk to you and to let you know something about your own DNA as Air Commandos. We appreciate this opportunity.
Thank you, gentlemen. On behalf of the 1st Special Operations Wing and the members of Team Hurlburt, we are truly humbled by your presence and grateful that you all made the journey to come here and share your heroic stories. At this time, I would like to invite Colonel Conley to come forward to offer his remarks and then present a small token of our appreciation to the panel members. Colonel Conley, the floor is yours, sir.
All right, good morning, everyone. That's a tough act to follow, so I'm not even going to try. But I would like to thank all of you for coming out and making time out of busy schedules to be here. This is phenomenal. Being the first South Commander is a privilege every single day, but it's days like today that make me feel truly blessed to be part of such an amazing organization. We have 75 years of Air Commandos in this room, and I will tell you that Chief and I just returned from a 3-month deployment to Afghanistan, and we've got a lot of characters out there as well. But these characters that we call Air Commandos today have the same bravery, the same patriotism, the same innovation, the same DNA that starts right with these gentlemen on the stage. So again, to all of you, thank you for being here today. I'd also like to just say thank you to Major Tom Zach and his team for putting this event today. We got very broad commander's intent from General Webb, who let us run with this. I gave Major Tom Zach and his team probably even broader intent and said make this something special and unforgettable. And we're halfway through today, and I think we're already on track to make this something we'll never forget. I also know that as the installation commander, everyone's going to complain to me here this afternoon that the traffic's going to be bad getting off the side of the base and on the other side. So I'm going to wrap up, but I'd be remiss if I didn't say thank you on behalf of the First SOW to the gentleman that traveled to be with us today. So Chief, if you join me, we will present some mementos on behalf of the men and women of the 1st Special Operations Wing.
Thank you, Colonel Conley.
You may recognize the picture. Colonel Cole, you may recognize the picture. We'll start right here, Chief.
The panel members are receiving a framed copy of the official event flyer that was posted around Hurlburt to announce the commemoration of the 75th anniversary of Operation Thursday. This graphic design was created by Major Seth Jefferson from the 319th Special Operations Squadron. The frames also include coins from the 1st Special Operations Wing Commander and Command Chief. Field, we are proud of our heritage and the men and women who came before us. We are honored to be members of an organization that prides itself on problem solving and decisive action to achieve our objectives. The legacy forged on this day, 75 years ago, paved the way for today's Air Commandos. We live by our ethos, any place, anytime, anywhere. Our closing video presentation demonstrates just that, where we came from to who we are today.
Any place, anytime, anywhere. That's not a threat. It's a promise to our country. This original motto took shape as part of the 1st Air Commando group in World War II and grew with the Chindits in Burma, the carpetbaggers in Europe, Jungle Jim in Vietnam, and the hard lessons of Iran. AFSOC isn't the movies. It's real. We're small in number because not many people are cut out for this. In our business, quality is always better than quantity. Air Commandos. They like to call us elite. But if you ever hear anybody in AFSOC say they're better than anyone else, do us a favor, talk some sense into them. AFSOC is an Air Force inside the Air Force. We're not better. We just received special training. We're different. We'll go wherever the mission demands. We'll do whatever our country requires at a moment's notice. We were never exactly the kind of kids who cuddle inside the lines, but we are exceptional at carrying out orders. We think outside the box, and if there's no box, we make one, and then we think outside it. We turn highways into runways. We can turn a shack into a hospital and perform surgery in the dark. And we'll turn a card table into an airfield command center. We get the job done. We fly some of the most unique and specialized aircraft the world has ever known. We bring back scorched, torn up, and shot all to hell. And it is precisely those moments when you know that every second that plane is on the ground backyard maintenance tips the scales. We don't take shortcuts. There is a way. We find it. Seconds matter. Ready today, relevant tomorrow, resilient always. Those aren't just words that sound good in speech. We improvise. We make do. We figure it out. We innovate. 90% of this job is mental. That's the truth. We don't make noise, and we don't ever like to talk about ourselves. We're a close-knit family of exceptionally well-trained airmen who take care of our own and let our actions do the talking to the rest of the world. There's a quote on a wall at a training squadron at Hurlburt, with all their fallen listed nearby. It says, "Whom shall I send? And who will go for us?" And I said, "Here am I. Send me. Any place, anytime, anywhere. Aim high."
Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our presentation. Thank you for joining us today. The next event is the commemoration ceremony at the Hurlburt Field Air Park at 11 o'clock. Shuttle buses are available for your convenience and will return you to the parking areas following the ceremony. Thank you and have a great day.